Hey everyone, welcome back to the next session for the SOFA Summit. I am really thrilled to introduce our upcoming speaker. This individual, he is an expert in the 1031 industry. His name is Scott Saunders at API Exchange. Scott, how you doing today?
Mark, I'm great. It's great to be with you for the SOFA Summit here. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, we're glad to have you back. So Scott has done over 100, personally done over 100,000 1031s. He's actually at the forefront of the industry. He's the individual that actually lobbies for the benefits of 1031s to keep it around. He actually did. How many meetings did you do last
I
year?
had 66 meetings with senators and people in Congress last year, sitting down for about an hour at a time, just saying, here's the benefit of Section 1031. Here's why it's good for the economy. Here's what we do for the GDP. And here's why you don't want to mess with it at all. So we spent a lot of time doing that.
That's incredible. Because I remember last year, that was the fear, right? Oh, 1031, it's going to go away. If you want to do a 1031, you need to do it now. What are your thoughts on that? I feel like they say that every year.
Last year that started, it was a proposal that President Biden had. So that's where it started, was from the president. And then that became a talking point, and it was a legitimate concern. I don't think it's quite every year, but what happens is it's really tempting to look at the amount of deferred taxes. And if you're in Congress and you want to scoop up extra revenue, they're like, wait a minute, we have all these fat cat rich real estate investors getting the benefit. If we could take that money and put it into whatever program better. What they miss is that if you take away 1031, the transactional activity with real estate would just come down dramatically. So it's not just the investor, banks, lenders, appraisers, the real estate professionals, anybody, people that fix up properties before you sell them, everybody would see less transactional activity. And so the number is staggering. It's a $96 billion a year positive for the GDP doing 1031s. It comes out of an Ernst & Young study. So when we show that data, all of a sudden they go, okay, we get it a little bit better.
Wow. Is there a statistic on the amount of transactions that are 1031 exchanges, like the percentage for the whole industry?
It's tricky. There's one for the commercial side that estimates about 20 to 25% of all commercial transactions are an exchange, either on the sale or purchase. Residential, we don't have quite as clear data, and it's tricky because you got single family rentals, then you got that hybrid, you got vacation homes where you can do an exchange in some cases you can't. So not really.
Yeah, but on the commercial side, that's a major portion for sure.
Absolutely. And the commercial brokers were, CCIM, some of those groups were up there lobbying with us for the same thing, going, hey, this would really hurt our industry. Particularly, think about it. We came out of that pandemic. We've got buildings that need to be reimagined and repurposed, right? There are hotels that aren't going to get as much demand. We've seen some of them converted over to condos. And it's a tool that helps people kind of reposition and repurpose real estate.
Yeah. So why don't we just dive in? What even is a 1031 exchange?
Yeah, 1031, when you hear that, it comes from a section of the tax code called Section 1031. What it allows is, as an investor, you hold any property for investment or you use it in your business, you can exchange it for what's called a like kind property that's also held for investment. So if you think of a sale, I take my property, I get back cash. When you do an exchange, you're just giving up property, but instead of getting back cash, you're getting back like kind property held for investment. So it's really pretty simple from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And so from being simple, what are some of these rules and regulations, that you need to follow to actually do a 1031?
Yeah, the most common format is what we call a delayed exchange. So that's where you sell, you give up your property, and then you've got a certain period of time to purchase and identify like kind property. So in the delayed exchange, you sell your property and you close on it. That's day zero. You've got a 45-day window to identify a suitable replacement property, or people that are a little more savvy, maybe they identify multiple properties. So they've got a few options. So that's the first 45 days. That ends at midnight of the 45th day. Then you have another 135 days to actually close on what you've identified. So think of it as 180 days maximum to finish a delayed exchange. You close, you identify an asset or multiple assets, and then you do your loan, right? You do all the due diligence, and then you actually close on something that's been identified. So we call that a delayed exchange, is the most common format.
Sure. And so what we've seen a lot is that, you have that 45-day identification period, right? What do you have to actually do to identify during that time?
Yeah. To identify, you've actually got to zero in on specific properties. It's not as simple as saying, oh, I want to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Memphis. You got to zero down and get a specific property that you want to buy. I'm going to buy on this street, right? I'm going to buy on 312 Main Street. That's one of my identified properties. Fortunately, the rules, they give you a little flexibility. You've got 2 primary ways to do it. You can use what's called the 3 property rule. So I could identify 3 assets. You don't have to worry about the value at all, but you're limited to 3. There's another rule, which is called the 200% rule. So you can identify a bunch of smaller properties as long as you don't go over 200% of the value of what you sold. So let's say I'm in Los Angeles and I sell for $1.5 million. I could identify up to $3 million of properties in the Memphis market, which you and I know that's quite a few single family homes in that,
That's a ton.
B2C class.
Yeah.
So that's how you identify as one of those 2 rules. You've got to identify with what's known as a qualified intermediary, that party that puts the transaction together. And it's got to be signed and dated by the taxpayer or the investor by midnight of the 45th day. And that's the one, and I'm sure you hear that a lot too. Gosh, it's really hard in 45 days to scramble around and do that. That's set in stone. It's statutory. You can't get around it. But as you and I know, as working with investors, sometimes you can start looking a little bit earlier. You don't have to wait until you close on your sale. You can list your property and then start kicking the tires for what you want to purchase much earlier, right? Narrow the field of potential properties, get a good feel for the marketplace much earlier than before you close.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, over here at MIP, I mean, we understand the stress of going through this process, right? You want to make sure that you can find quality properties and enough properties to actually be able to, not have to pay, taxes to Uncle Sam, because of course that's the goal. So that's why, we always make it as easy as humanly possible for you as an investor. So we do have a 1031 program. Whenever you are interested in doing a 1031, please reach out to, myself, contact us, let us know what your goals are, what your exchange amounts are. And, we will make sure that we can basically almost guarantee that we get you the properties. If you commit to the amount of capital that you're going to bring to us, well, then we can commit the houses and just kind of have that symbiotic relationship to, at the end of the day, just, reduce stress for everyone.
Yeah. Hey, and Mark, I'm just going to give a shout out to you and MIP on that. I work obviously all around the country. I know a lot of different providers and things are out there. It's pretty rare to find a company that has assets like MIP does, and that you're willing to say, look, when you're doing an exchange, let us know what your requirements are. Let us know how much equity you got, how much debt, and we'll try and look at our pipeline and our portfolio, and we'll try and carve out some of those for you and help you out. So just a huge shout out to what you do. I think that's really, you're being sensitive to the marketplace and you're providing a little bit of an extra value add service by doing that. That is the biggest stress that people face in an exchange is, gosh, I'm going to sell here. Well, what am I going to go into? That's a very stressful thing. So I think the fact that you guys will do that and work with people in advance and try and line things up and accommodate that, man, that's a huge benefit. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, no, our pleasure. I mean, like you said, the whole goal is to reduce the stress as much as humanly possible. And well, let's say you are in that position, all right? You're at day 45 and you have $1 million, deferred, delayed 1031 exchange, but you can only find $900,000 worth of property. So let's say you need to get that extra $100,000 worth of property, but you just can't find the house for whatever reason. What happens in that situation?
Well, if you don't find something else and identify within the 45 days, just that piece of it becomes taxable. So I sell for 1 million, I go into, let's say, 900,000, and there's 100,000 left over. A lot of times that'll be extra cash that's sitting there. So we call that cash boot. And it's interesting, Mark. People sometimes think like, oh, I got into exchange, it's all got to match up perfectly. 1/3 of the investors out in the country right now take some boot. So it's really common where somebody says, look, I'll sell an asset, I'll go buy a whole bunch more properties. And if the numbers don't perfectly match up and I have, 100,000 left over, you pay taxes on that 100,000, but the entire 900,000 that you reinvested is deferred. So in a way, you get the benefit, most of the benefit of doing an exchange, and you pay taxes on a little cash. Now you got that cash to do with what you want. So sometimes we have to educate people. It's not an all or nothing proposition, right? A partial exchange still offers a lot of tax benefits, and it's not that uncommon at all. In fact, very common that people do that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that there is a boot. I love how that is an option, because the whole goal is to reduce stress and make it so that investor is not forced to buy a crappy property from someone just because they don't want to blow the whole 1031 exchange. You can actually focus on being selective and buying quality properties. And if you can't find enough of those, well, then no worries. That's exactly what the boot is for. So how much does this all cost? Let's say you have $1 million house in California. How
Uh-huh.
do we have to pay you guys?
So every company's going to charge a different fee. There's no universal fee. Ballpark, you're going to look at somewhere between $700 to maybe $1,500 is kind of a ballpark. At our particular company, our fee is sell one, and you can buy up to three for $1,250. So our fee structure is really good for somebody that's going to sell one property and buy multiple instead of getting nickel and dime.
Hmm.
Other companies might charge, let's say, $1,000 and then maybe $200 for each purchase. So if somebody's selling for 1 million, when they reinvest in the Memphis market, they're going to buy 6 or 7, right? So maybe each one of those is an additional 200. Which, Mark, when you think of the benefit of an exchange, deferring a massive, I mean, today the taxes are a lot. Everybody's properties have popped up in value, so you're deferring a lot of tax. So you pay a couple $100 per property, to get into more. It's a pretty small transactional cost where you get a lot of benefit out of it. And gosh, we see people doing that where they come out of the West Coast. They got a property's worth 1 million. They come into a market like Memphis and they can't believe the cash flow that they're getting, right? They're buying 6, 7, 8 replacement properties. The cash flow, let's say on a, I'll pick let's call it $1,200 per house roughly, compared to what they were getting. So in California, they're making maybe 3,500 rent, but now they have 1,200 times 7 houses rent. They can't believe it. And you know what they do? I'm sure you see it. They tell their friends, hey, you guys got to look at this. Look what you could do. You could redeploy the capital and get a whole lot more cash flow out of it. And Memphis is a strong market, right? It's been a cash flow market, but it's been really strong the last few years on appreciation, and it's been doing great. It's a phenomenal market.
Yeah, it's been exciting to be that hybrid market, but we are still that consistent linear market. We're not that boom or bust like you'll see in the San Franciscos of the world. And that's what makes it this nice, bedrock for being an actual investor. So then when it comes to other tax strategies, what else do you recommend besides doing a 1031 exchange?
Well, 1031 exchange is a great tool. You do it at disposition. So your choice is pay taxes, a lot of them. So you'd be paying depreciation recapture at 25%, federal capital gains at 15 or 20, depending upon taxable income, net investment income potentially, if you've got more gain, and then your state tax, which can be as high as 13.3% in California. So you add all those together, you got a huge tax bill. So that's where an exchange comes in, is now you don't have that tax bill and you redeploy it into more real estate. One of the things that we've seen, increasingly is that some people will do what's called a cost segregation study. The slang for it is called a cost seg. And they're doing them now on single family homes. In fact, Mark, you and I were chatting, I picked up quite a few homes last year, and I did a cost segregation study on every single family house. And there's a benefit for me in that. And what you do is you get, the simple way of describing it is you're just front loading your depreciation. You're reclassifying a house that's depreciated flat, straight line over 27 and a half years. And now you're breaking it out into other components that could be depreciated at 5, 10, 15 years. So things like the ceiling fans and your refrigerator and stoves and all those things have a shorter lifespan. So now you get that depreciation up front. And as we were talking about, right now this year, you get something called bonus depreciation. So you can literally get 100% of that pulled up into this tax year. And I just think with inflation doing what it's doing, we could fiddle around with the numbers, whatever it is. We all know inflation's a lot, right? We go to grocery shopping, we put gas in our cars, inflation's here and it hurts. This is a way that we can use the tax code to really front load our tax benefits today and take advantage of that depreciation in today's dollars and get that benefit now, which is really, I think, a smart choice.
Yeah, it's always a good option to be able to have a way to help with taxes at purchase. And so when it comes to the cost segregation, a lot of people will say, well, that's only for full-time real estate professionals or REP status investors. What about just the new investor that just wants to buy their first house or their fifth house or their 10th house, that doctor, that lawyer? What do you say to them?
Yeah, certainly if you're a real estate professional, and that's a whole nother category, not smaller group fits into that niche, you get more benefit because you're able to take that loss and use it against active or ordinary income. What a lot of people don't know is the way the code is you've got some thresholds up to 100,000, you can write off 25,000 of that, which conveniently, Mark, I find with the houses I'm buying, they're in that 100 to 150,000 category. That's about what I'm getting in a cost
Is that the number you're talking about?
No, purchase. Let's say I buy for 150, and if I buy a house for 150, with the cost seg, I'll get maybe 25, 26,000 of depreciation. So interestingly, if somebody buys one house, right, they can use some of that without being a real estate professional. Now, it phases out between $100,000 in income and 150, right? So there's kind of a phase out where you get half of the benefit immediately. But not everybody's over that $150,000 income threshold. So if you're starting out as an investor and you buy one property, you do one cost segregation study and you get the benefit, that's a lot of tax savings. And guess what they can do with that tax savings, Mark? They can call up MIP and go, hey, I've just saved $25,000. That means I'm ready to buy another asset. And I'm sure you guys would love to help them out with that second purchase.
We would love to. We would love to. How much does this all cost? Like, do you have referrals for the company to go to?
They're pretty nominal. Where I go use a company out in California, and it runs about $400 a cost seg. I use software, so mine's software driven. I really kind of use the appraisal, property inspection as the tools to do that. I'm doing them as we were chatting about. I do them at home. It takes me less than 20 minutes to do a cost segregation study. So I'm spending $400, getting 20-some thousand in write-off. Now, that's my depreciation. Remember, that doesn't mean I'm going to get that much tax dollars back. It's going to be 25,000 in write-off. Let's say I get 8, 9, 10,000 of that. But that's money that's positive to me right there. So, you want to use the tools. I guess that's what's the beauty. Exchange is a great tool to keep building your portfolio. A cost segregation study is a tool when you buy it. Mark, from watching investors through the years, the ones that really build portfolios and get larger, they're really savvy to using every legitimate advantage in the tax code to the fullest extent. And that sometimes separates those that kind of do a trajectory that goes up real fast versus those that just kind of go along at a slow and steady rate. So why not take advantage of things that are in the tax code incentives that stimulate real estate investment and provide a benefit to us as investors?
Amen. Well, the whole goal of, and one of the goals of Sofa Summit is to teach people how to scale. right? How to actually grow, how to go instead of just buying your first house, it's how to go from 10 to 50, right? So why don't you talk a little bit more about your current portfolio? When did you get your very first rental?
I got my very first rental in 2002 because I got my first one. And, it's a little complicated for me. I had an asset, went through a divorce, lost a few assets, but I will tell you, you hit something really interesting there, that word portfolio. Buying one rental is great. And you get, let's say, $300 cash flow, 200 or 300, whatever the number is. And it's a good thing. Where real estate gets exciting is when you learn how to scale it, right? So in my opinion, I'm at 55, 58 assets right now. You want to get to 5 as fast as you can. 5's at a real sweet spot because you have one vacancy. You generally have enough cash flow coming in to kind of cover it. And so I go 5 and then 10. Now, a lot of people start at 10 or 20. They go, oh, the loans get more complicated. That's not that big of a barrier. Everything I do are what are called non-QM or non-QM loans, which are for the people that are past their conventional loans, their first ones. Once you cross over there, it's actually really easy. You do pay a little more. There's a little premium on that. You got to pay more interest. But I do loans all the time where I literally just email my lender at midnight. Hey, I'm buying a few more assets. Here's what it is. I fill a little spreadsheet. I don't have to give them all my financials because I've got a relationship. So in
Mm.
some ways it's easier. So scaling and growing a portfolio, um, you know, you can do it with single family assets. You can build almost what I would call like a REIT like portfolio. And the assets are little baby assets. So these little single family homes that everybody wants to rent. They're not going to really go down in value a lot. Let's say everything plummets, so Memphis goes down by 2, 3, 4, $5,000, but not half of the value. It's
Mhm.
right, and then you got the cash coming in. So I just think people miss the fact that single family rentals can be a great tool to build a sizable portfolio, and I just look at it as kind of stacking them up. Right, you get one single family rental, get another, right? 4, you went on the bases, rinse and repeat, do it all over again. And it doesn't sound too exciting, right? I don't have any bragging rights of some big fancy office building down the street, but gosh, with COVID, I loved having bragging rights, having single family rentals in a market like Memphis. Everybody wants those, and they seem to, in all sorts of economies, gravitate to those types of assets.
Yeah, definitely. So I hear that you're working on a little program or course to teach people how to scale. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I am. I put together a course which really mirrors what I've done. So I started buying, onesie twosies and have grown a portfolio. And so I put together a whole course to show people how to go from 0 to 50 plus properties. And there are different skills along the way. Buying your first one's probably the toughest, but the skills in the middle to really scale it. There's some things that I've learned that I share, and there's some things I've learned, honestly, Mark, from my mistakes. I've made mistakes. We all have. So I actually have a whole section where I talk about here's my mistake. Right, I didn't do a sewer scope, and it cost me a lot of money. And little things. And so, sometimes with real estate, everybody brags about their wins and, the great lifestyle, whatever. And I actually take the other approach. I'm like, God, I screwed this up. And boy, I botched this up. So don't do this because I learned the hard way. So really what I did is I just laid out for people what I did to go and scale and grow a portfolio and put that together. And then I've got a lot on the tax side for people that as they grow, they're going to need a little bit more of those advanced tools. So you were talking exchanges. There are things called reverse exchanges,
Mhm.
improvement exchanges, reverse improvement. You can exchange air rights, water rights. So I go a little bit deeper on things that maybe people hadn't thought. You can exchange into oil and gas, believe it or not, or out of oil and gas. So I go a little deeper down the road for people that need more than just kind of that appetizer. They really want the main course. They want to sink their teeth into it and know how to do that. I just share from my own personal experiences, what I've done and kind of package that all together in a course.
That sounds incredible. How do we get our hands on it and get access to it?
You'd go to scottrsaunders.com. So just my name, scottrsaunders.com, and I've got it all there. And and by the way, Mark, as you know, I'm welcome to just field ideas from people too. So, if they're investors that just have questions, I do 1031s professionally. I'm pretty good at that. Been doing it for 34, 35 years now. But I'm also an investor personally. I drink the Kool-Aid. I love real estate. I think it's a great asset class. It's overlooked. Some people always like, the Grant Cardones, you got to go apartments and stuff. No, you don't. Single family, just keep loading up little base hits here and there. And before you know it, in a few years, give it some time, you've got a really significant portfolio that does some pretty cool things just by scooping up single family homes slow and steady. There's some, as you've seen, I'm sure with your clients, there's a magic that happens as you build a portfolio. And all of a sudden you look around, you're like, wow, it's got a life of its own. It's growing on its own with cash flow. It's appreciating. I'm paying down my debt. There are all these things working to your advantage there.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, thank you very much. That's all, we had today. I mean, what I take out of, being able to talk with you, and probably one of my favorite parts about a 1031 exchange is when I get to talk numbers to an investor that says, hey, I have $1 million house in California. What kind of cash flow can I get if I do a 1031 into Memphis? And when we have that conversation, they just go, wow. And that is just really exciting. That's really powerful to be able to provide that value and to be able to help. So if that is you, if you're interested in learning more, Scott, how do we get a hold of you?
Get a hold of me. 888-531-1031 is my toll-free number. Easy one to remember. My email, scott@apiexchange.com. So A is an apple, P is in Paul, I is an igloo, the word exchange.com. And you know what? Anytime, just whether you have an exchange going on or not, I answer questions. I can't give tax or legal advice, but I'm happy to give you some input and let you know what the rules will allow you to do and what you can't do. So happy to help out. And, you guys at MIP, I got to tell you, you're a class act. You just do a great service, provided a great product for investors. I love your newsletters, how you share sometimes what's going on in the market. So being a remote investor, I'm here in Colorado, as you can see behind me. I love hearing you share what's going on in Memphis and maybe an investment over here. So you do a great job of not only providing a great asset and the property management, but then just keeping us informed. I feel like I'm connected to the Memphis market, even though I haven't visited the market for a number of years now. So thanks for all you do.
Yeah, well, that means the world. We appreciate you as well. So everyone out there that's listening, hope you found a lot of value. Please just give Scott a call or an email, even if you have a couple of questions. He's very accommodating, and we'll see you for the next session. Thanks, guys.